Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why me? Why do I feel so disconnected, even when I'm around people? Or honestly, especially when I'm around people. You're not alone. And I can say that because I've been there. And if you're anything like me, you have a rich inner world that you keep private, while quietly wishing there were more people that you could share it with. Or maybe you're really driven and hardworking, doing all the things that people say would make you happy. But inside, something feels off. Like there's a part of you you've had to bury in order to fit in. And that part is desperately longing to be seen. If any of this feels true, I want to help you make sense of it, because I know how confusing and isolating it can feel to live this way. So here's the truth. Your behaviors are natural adaptations. They evolved to protect you, but now they're holding you back. And there's 6 hidden psychological patterns that you need to understand. And once you do, you'll finally see why your mind and your life have been the way they are. By the way, I'm Shu. Over the past 15 years, I've committed to studying psychology, spirituality, and communication to figure out what actually creates real, meaningful relationships. And I want to help you do the same. In this video, I'm going to walk you through all 6 patterns, plus a step-by-step framework on how to start shifting them in your life. All right, so let's jump into the first pattern. So imagine you're sitting with someone on a date or grabbing coffee, and instead of hearing them, your attention is darting everywhere. You're scanning for pauses, their tone, their eyes. You're tracking every micro cue, not because you want to, but because your body went there on its own. This is hypervigilance. So when we're children, our survival depended on our caretakers. And if our caretakers in our environment weren't consistent, stable, and predictable, then we started to scan for threats, looking for signs that something's going to go wrong, danger, or that they might leave us. And even though we're no longer children, we've practiced that from an early age all the way through adulthood. And this pattern has become deeply ingrained without us even noticing it. So the first step is always to bring what has been unconscious into our conscious awareness, to notice what's happening. So with hypervigilance, some of the deep unconscious limiting beliefs are people are dangerous and unpredictable, or that if I lose connection with someone, I'm going to die. And as you're watching this video right now, hopefully you do feel safe. And this is the beginning point, is to notice what calm and safe feels like. Only when you know what calm and safe feels like, then you'll be able to contrast that with unsafety or anxiety. When you notice yourself starting to scan for threats, you can start to speak to yourself as an adult. For example, I'm safe right now, or I'm an adult, and if something happens, I can handle it. My safety is not dependent on someone else or how they think of me. So these cognitive tools can be helpful, but we also need to start working with our nervous system directly. And that's where breath work and grounding techniques can come in. So deep breathing, you might have heard of box breathing. So 4 in, hold for 4, 4 out, hold for 4. Diaphragmatic breathing, breathing into the belly, or the physiological sigh, which is a long, deep inhale through the nose, and then another short blast in, and then deeply exhaling. Another technique is called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is name 5 things that you see, 4 that you hear, 3 you can touch, 2 that you can smell, and 1 you can taste. And this helps you bring your attention to the present moment, to what's actually here instead of this memory that you're replaying through your physiology. Okay, next we're going to talk about why does it exist, what it's trying to serve. And this is a really useful frame because it takes us out of judgment of this pattern or behavior as right or wrong, and instead helps us see that it's meant to do something, it's served a purpose. And the language and framework that I'm going to use to talk about this is through the lens of needs. And we all have needs, but we have different ways of meeting those needs, what we call strategies. So if we're hungry, we have a need for food. One strategy could be to cook. Another strategy is to go get takeout. There are different strategies to meet the same needs. So when we look at all the different needs, we can come up with creative strategies to meet as many of them as possible. All right, returning back to hypervigilance. The needs are obviously safety, predictability, and security, which I've talked about. But the unmet needs are ease and also connection. So when you're in hypervigilance, you are working so hard scanning for everything. Your mind is racing, trying to guess what's going on, trying to predict the situation. It's exhausting. If relationships feel that hard, then of course you're going to isolate and not engage. But even if you are engaging in a relationship, the fact that your mind is working so hard means that you're not being present with the person in front of you. So let's think about some different ways to meet these needs of safety, predictability, security, as well as ease and connection. I already talked about some of the internal tools that we have access to. So our intention, our awareness, our breath, our perception. But we also have relational skills. The most important one is communication. So instead of trying to guess how another person is feeling, we can ask them. For example, if you said something that felt awkward and now you're worried about how they're interpreting that or they might be judging you, you can say, I'm not sure how that came across. How did you interpret that? Or if they said something that you're not sure about, and instead of trying to guess their intention, you can just say, I want to understand what you meant by that. And in addition to helping your mind relax, you're also inviting in genuine connection. You're inviting the other person to share about their experience. Okay, so we talked about our inner work. We've talked about our relational skills. The next section is about lifestyle changes. By this, I mean our environment, who we're surrounding ourselves with, and our lifestyle habits. By the way, these three areas, the inner work, the relational skills, and the lifestyle changes, are the three pillars of my relational integration framework. If you're interested to learn more about that, or if you want to get some support on applying what you're learning in this video in your actual life, then there's a link below where you can book a call with me and we'll talk through that together. Okay, back to the lifestyle changes. So first and foremost, you need to learn that repatterning your nervous system takes time. And when you're learning a new skill or you're trying to repattern a conditioned behavior, you need to start small. You don't want to jump into the most intense charged situations. So look for familiar environments and people that are warm. And these don't have to be a long interaction, but just notice what happens in your body when there is a sense of anxiety or nervousness, and start practicing some of these mindfulness tools, even in daily interactions. And then when you're ready to go a little bit deeper, look for friends, family members, a therapist, or a coach, where people want to support you in opening up in deeper, authentic conversations. And the last thing, but also very important, is that you need to take care of your basic needs. You need to sleep, hydrate, get your nutrition, get some movement. And if you do all those things, your body is going to have more capacity to be able to withstand the intensity of being in the world. And there will be days when you feel great, and there will be days when you feel like an absolute mess. That's totally fine. It's a part of the journey. And just take that as feedback about what happened. Who are the people that help me feel great? What are the places that help me feel great? What are the routines that help me feel great? And what are the ones that don't? And ask yourself, what needs were being met or unmet that led me to feel this way? And as you continue to explore and map out your own nervous system and your own life and relationships, over time, what once felt really, really hard will become natural and even joyful. All right, let's move on to the second pattern, which is withdrawal. So I mentioned earlier that if you're constantly feeling danger in relationships, then you're going to want to pull back. So people withdraw from social interactions when they feel too much emotional intensity. And it doesn't have to be fear. It could also be sadness, grief, anything that feels too much for the emotional body. And this often happens for children who didn't have very good emotional boundaries. So if their parents had a lot of large emotions, and if the children were very sensitive, they could have picked up on the parent's emotion. And they may not have had the guidance and the space to process those feelings. And so in response, the way they're able to reclaim that sense of autonomy and calm is to back away. So some of the beliefs are people are too much, and the only way that I can feel good is to withdraw. Or that how I feel is dependent on another person's feeling, and I don't have choice in that. And so when you notice this, some of the reframes are, I can have emotional boundaries. That feeling is their experience, and I don't need to take that on. I can trust them to take care of themselves, and I'll take care of me. In other words, I can take care of myself and stay in connection at the same time. And in terms of our nervous system, when we withdraw, oftentimes we go into a shutdown state, meaning that there's a lot of numbness, lethargy, or we simply distract ourselves with scrolling, food, whatever. And so to work with our nervous system, we have to start with some gentle movement, doing some stretching, to listen to some upbeat music to get our systems out of that shutdown, frozen place. And we have more access to our prefrontal cortex, our executive function, then we're able to think about what do we need in this moment. For withdrawal and overwhelm, what we're really needing is that sense of calm, predictability, ease in relationship, as well as autonomy, our ability to choose how much to engage in, when, and how. But when we withdraw, what we're losing is that sense of commitment and consistency to the people we care about. For example, if you're feeling overwhelmed with work and then someone texts, "Hey, how you doing? Do you want to hang out tonight?" If that relationship has some emotional charge for you, that might be too much. And you may feel completely overwhelmed with the stress of work as well having to deal with the emotions in that relationship. And so you just ghost, you don't respond. But the impact is that the other person doesn't hear from you and assumes that you just don't really care. And so instead, what we can do is to notice, hey, I'm feeling this way. I do care about the relationship, and I'm going to communicate. Something you can say is, hey, just got your message. I'm feeling stressed today. I'll respond tomorrow. Or, hey, I'm feeling really stressed. Can we take it easy today? All right, and now looking at the lifestyle holistically, finding low intensity, for example, one-on-one hangouts instead of large groups, shorter duration, and plan for rest. Look at your overall life and make sure that you're scheduling in time for your nervous system to slow down and process what you've been feeling. Again, this is a skill, and skills take time to develop. So take it easy in the beginning and then work your way up. All right, the third pattern is emotional suppression. On the outside, you look steady and composed. You do your work, you keep up with your responsibilities, people rely on you. But inside, it can feel really lonely because no one actually knows what's happening. And this is really common for men who are taught that vulnerability and emotions equal weakness, and that maintaining a sense of control is the only way to move through life. And for a lot of people, this happens so early in life that it becomes habitual and they don't even notice it. So for example, if someone asks, "How are you doing?" Not just as a greeting, but genuinely curious, but your response is still, "I'm fine." And so these core beliefs, again, are, I have to be strong. A deeper layer of this is that if I show my emotions, if I show my vulnerability, I'll lose respect and status in the group. I'll be made fun of. I'll be shamed for being a and saying that, like, that's how I grew up, playing sports, lifting weights, just around a bunch of really bro-y bros. And it's taken a long time for me to embrace my own sensitivity, my own emotional landscape. But I'll say that connection, real connection, is not possible without that. So here are some mindset shifts. First is to realize that emotions are information. Not only is it information, it's wisdom. It's data that you need to have in order to take the best choice in life. And that vulnerability is actually courage. It takes a tremendous amount of courage and resilience to turn inward and face the things that scare you. And so for all the guys out there who have been holding it in for so long, I want you to take your strength and your courage and face the difficulty. And it's kind of like a cold plunge. In the beginning, it's going to be very, very uncomfortable. But eventually, you get used to it. And it'll feel way better afterwards. And the key to all of this is to not struggle, to not fight, but instead to surrender, relax, and receive. Allow your natural processes in your body to just happen. Your emotions aren't going to kill you. They're a part of who you are. But you also don't want to overwhelm yourself completely all at once. And so another technique is called titrating, meaning you slowly let things in a bit at a time. So to do this, come back to that sense of groundedness and safety. Find what we call an anchor or a resource, something that gives you a sense of support. It could be a friend, a memory, a pet, a scene in nature, a song, an image. And hold that in your mind and feel that warmth and support from that resource. And then start to notice the difficult emotion, the experience, and go back and forth between the thing that gives you support and the thing that's challenging you. All right, let's continue to look at the needs of this suppression strategy, which are for strength, agency, and self-trust. We talked about strength already. Agency is the ability to choose. There's this belief that if we feel our emotions, we're going to lose control, we're going to be overwhelmed. And we want to have that sense of choice, our ability to choose how we process, when we process our emotions. Because there are absolutely situations in which we don't have the opportunity to do that. If we're in a life or death situation, it's probably not the best moment to have an emotional catharsis. And so suppression is actually very useful. But in a relationship, when we're not in life or death, and when suppression becomes habitual, that's the problem. And so the needs that are unmet here are for expression, for being seen by someone else, and our own honesty with how we're feeling and who we are and what matters to us. Because we don't have selective choice about what we suppress. When we suppress our fears, our sadness, our grief, our anger, we also suppress our joy. And I find that really sad. And I'm keeping this in the video to demonstrate that emotions will move on their own, that they arise, but then they also dissipate. And in that moment, I could have suppressed that sadness and continued on with the talk, with the video. But instead, I wanted to demonstrate what it's like to allow the natural rising and dissipation of emotion. Okay, all right, let's move on. So going on to the communication skills. Now, I'm noticing sadness. And so pay attention to the pattern here, which is that I'm not saying, I'm sad, I'm so sad, which can feel kind of, it's hard for guys, I think, to say that, to be so direct of I'm sad or I'm feeling sad. But instead, noticing sadness. I'm noticing some sadness come up. And there's actually a lot of truth to this. Because we can also identify not just as our ego or our physical bodies, but as our awareness, our consciousness. And as awareness and consciousness, for example, in meditation, what arises and goes away is not actually the entirety of who we are. So by embodying that stillness, we're simply just noticing. I'm noticing anger. I'm noticing sadness. I'm noticing joy. And we're able to maintain that sense of groundedness and equanimity. And that's very powerful, to be able to notice, to feel, but not to be swayed. And another strategy is to name it from a part. So instead of I'm angry, again, viewing ourselves as this one entity, and I'm just anger or I'm not. And instead noticing that, hey, there's a part of me that's angry, and there's a part of me that's very present and aware. And this also gives us a little bit of distance from that emotion and helps us connect into that present leadership of self. Okay, and here are some places where you can start to practice feeling and revealing. So men's groups, support circles, therapy, coaching, and also just journaling at home. The last thing I'll say is that it doesn't have to be these big reveals. You can just start with, a little bit at a time. And so if you think about lifting weights and strength training, it's about progressive overload and giving your system time to adapt. And when your system learns that it's safe to reveal, it'll naturally do more and more of that. All right, the fourth pattern is self-editing, showing a curated version of yourself instead of the entirety. Whereas suppression was completely cutting yourself off from emotion, self-editing, you're still feeling things, but you only express some of them. Essentially, you're playing it safe and you're showing people what you think they'll like. And I think all of us do this to some degree, right? Because as we're children, we're taught that there are appropriate ways to behave and inappropriate ways to behave. But if we don't have the sense that we're loved unconditionally, then we try to earn that love through our modified behavior. And I think this is also really common in our age today because of social media, where people are expected to be constantly happy. And so we hide the parts of ourselves that feel like they're not polished enough, or embarrassing, or sad, or weak. And we just put on this fake mask of happiness. But it's not real. It lacks authenticity. And even when people do accept that version of ourselves, we're really just reinforcing this pattern. And so it feels really lonely to be with other people because they never get to see our full selves. There are parts of us that are always hidden. And the painful limiting belief is that being accepted by others is more important than being authentically myself. So the counter narrative is that I can be myself and belong, that people want to know the real me. And if you're watching this, I want you to know that I want to know the real you. I mean, I don't know you, but I want to know you, the real you. And I would say that this is not about you at all. It's actually about me. Like, this is something I value. I value authenticity. And like, no matter who you are and how you experience life, like, I want to know that. I want to see your genuine experience. And I hope you can believe that. And I hope that you believe that there are many people in this world that want to get to know the real you. And you have to just find them. And yes, it may take some time to find them, but we're out here. So another frame is to treat everything as an experiment, to play and to test. Like, what happens if I show myself a little bit more here? What happens if I tell this joke? What happens if I share how I'm actually feeling? And just notice how people respond. They might surprise you. And if they don't accept you fully, if they react in a way that feels harsh and you don't feel seen, this is where you get to practice self-compassion and self-acceptance, and talking to yourself as the ideal parent that you wish you had. All right, in terms of needs, self-filtering is trying to meet acceptance and belonging, but at the cost of authenticity and fully being seen. So in a relationship, when we communicate, we can say something like, hey, this feels really vulnerable, but I'm going to share it anyways. Or just preface with, I want to share something that's really honest. And if you're hearing this and reading this and it feels edgy, yeah, it can be, for sure. But the more you practice and the more mirroring that you get back, that it's safe, and not only safe, but that this is wanted and welcomed, then you'll develop the confidence to share more and more personal things. Okay, and some spaces that make this more accessible. So creative spaces, open mics, writing circles, art classes, where the intention is about self-expression, even all the weird, quirky parts of ourselves. These are the spaces where it's really, really encouraged. So it can be really fun to be there and to just soak in other people's vibe as well. And so the fifth pattern is called hesitation. It's essentially not engaging in relationships or not engaging fully in relationships until there's a certain level of safety. But relationships and trust and connection, they don't just magically happen. They're built over time through slow, gradual reveals and exchanges. And this is all based on trying to protect from rejection. And this pattern appears in people with perfectionism tendencies, that there's a belief that before they act or engage in a relationship, they have to check and check again to make sure that there is safety and alignment. So some mindset shifts in the beginning are that connection and trust take time. They require an initial investment to get over that activation barrier. And that activation barrier can feel like awkwardness or discomfort. And you can remind yourself, hey, I can actually tolerate awkwardness, I can tolerate discomfort, and I'm willing to give it a try. Another mindset shift is to embrace curiosity instead of judgment. When you're meeting someone or entering into a conversation or relationship, embrace not knowing what's going to happen. Embrace the discomfort of uncertainty. And again, bring in a sense of playfulness and experimentation and wonder of asking, what could happen? What could this turn into? So by hesitating, entering into a relationship, we're really trying to meet needs for assurance and a sense of permission. Assurance that we're going to be safe and permission that it's okay to reveal ourselves. But as I said earlier, relationships are a skill set, and you build a skill set by practicing and getting into relationships. Like any skill, the less you practice, the less you use it, the more it'll atrophy. Building new relationships become harder, so it becomes a downward spiral. But the inverse is also true. As you start gaining momentum upwards and getting more skillful and then receiving the positive reinforcement, it's going to feel better to meet new people and to deepen the relationships you already have. So it requires some activation and effort. But you can start slow with something easy like, hey, thought of you today. How's it going? Or hey, I haven't talked to you in a while. What's been new? Or remembering small things about a person and their schedule. Like, how does your event go? So starting with these small bids for connection allows you to feel safe while still moving forward. And again, it may feel awkward to make small talk because you naturally want to get into the depth of real, raw, meaningful conversation. But you have to realize that this is also kind of how most relationships start, is with these like surface level interactions. And gradually, as there's more trust, then there are deeper and deeper layers of reveals. And in order to allow for this pace of relationship to develop, you need consistency and repetition. So finding communities that you can join and groups that are consistent and regular, that meet regularly. I want to reiterate the importance of creating some lifestyle changes for this particular pattern. This will give you the assurance that you don't need to get it all right immediately, that you can see someone have a small micro exchange, and that's positive, and then do it again and again. And even if something doesn't land immediately, that you'll have additional exposure and opportunities. And this will take the pressure off of each interaction as a success or failure. All right, our sixth and final pattern is the outsider identity. And the thought is, I am too different to belong. And so I'm going to keep myself on the outside because if I don't try, I can't fail. And I'd rather feel different than feel the pain of rejection. And this one forms when, as children, we're not given the validation of who we are, or we might have experienced bullying or abuse. And that pain becomes so big, especially for kids, that we need to make sense of it. We need to have an understanding of why the world is the way they are. And as children, we don't have the knowledge and the wisdom to understand all of what's happening. So we make up a story about ourselves. We take on the responsibility of, it must be me. there's something wrong or different about me. And that's why I'm alone. That's why I experience this pain. It's a way to understand and make sense of it. And here are the tools that might help. First, acknowledging that you want to belong, that you want connection. And this is actually a really large step to take because it's about turning towards our vulnerability. And this can be quite painful if for most of our lives, we've kind of ignored these connection needs, to be able to admit to ourselves that this is something that I want. I do want connection. I do want love. I do want belonging. It can really reveal a lot of deep vulnerability and pain. And so I encourage you to bring a lot of compassion for yourself in this process, to be really kind and gentle with yourself, and to remind yourself that there are people out there like you and that want to get to know you, and that you're not separated from the world. And there is a practice from Buddhism that can really help with this. It's called metta, or loving kindness. And essentially, you're offering different levels of compassion. So offering compassion to yourself, someone close to you, or someone or something that you have a lot of positive affection for. And then someone who's neutral, person at the grocery store or the gas station. And then someone who you have judgment or conflict with, someone who you don't like. And then finally is to have compassion for the entire world and all beings. And in this way, you are uniting yourself with the entire humanity. And in terms of relationship and communication skills, practicing empathy can really help with this. What I mean by that is understanding while the surface of our human experience may be different, that we grew up in different places, had different family upbringings, but our emotions are the same. We all feel pain. We all feel joy. We all long for love, connection, power, creativity. These are all human needs. And this is our shared humanity. Even though we don't connect on the strategies, we can connect on the needs, the purpose, the why we do what we do. So in terms of lifestyle, this one can be really tender. So I do recommend working with a therapist or a coach that can help hold the vulnerability and the tenderness with more compassion and skill. And of course, finding community spaces where there is more resonance, when you do feel like there are people like you. And a good place to start is to figure out what your values are and look for spaces where people share that and also celebrate those same values. And the last tip that I'll share is to volunteer. So one of the core needs of this strategy or this pattern is to create meaning, to understand our place in the world. And by volunteering, we're able to engage in contribution and to build an identity around our connection with other people and the world through service, instead of remaining on the outside. And also through the service of volunteering, we're able to meet other people in a way that we're taking the lens of our attention away from ourselves and putting it onto them. And there's more space for us to open our empathic attunement, our curiosity towards the other people. And through that process, you'll see that you're not so different, that we all go through struggle and we all want to be loved. Well, there you have it, the 6 psychological patterns that hopefully explain your loneliness, because these patterns at one point in your life protected you. Hypervigilance protected you from unpredictability. Withdrawal protected you from overwhelm. Suppression protected you from shame. Self-filtering protected your belonging. Hesitation protected you from being rejected. And the outsider identity, the belief that you're different, protected you from the pain of wanting connection and not getting it. These weren't flaws. They were intelligent adaptations to the environments that you grew up in which didn't meet your needs. But what kept you safe then might be holding you back now from living a rich life with meaningful relationships. And so from this video, I hope you're taking away not just the understanding of why these patterns exist, but also how they function, understanding the needs that they were hoping to meet, as well as the needs that have been sacrificed as a result. And I hope you're also understanding that there are strategies, creative ways to meet all the needs that you have, to take care of yourself, feel that sense of safety, as well as stay connected in relationship. I also hope that there are some relational and communication tools that you'll take into your everyday life. And finally, I hope you got some ideas around the places, the people, and the habits and routines that would support and scaffold your relational development needs. And I want to leave you with this. Rewiring our nervous system, changing our patterns, rewriting our beliefs about ourselves, these things take time and they take repetition. They need intentional practice. And it's not always going to be comfortable. Growth often isn't. However, I want to encourage you to trust that it's worth it. It is worth the effort. It is worth the risks of vulnerability. And I hope that you will trust yourself even more every step you go along the way. Even when others can't meet you in the way that you hope, that you're able to meet yourself with compassion, care, and respect. And if you're needing help with this, if you're wanting support or guidance, please reach out. There's a link below where you can book a call with me. It's 30 minutes, free. We'll talk about where you are in life, what your goals are, and what blockages you're seeing from this video that you want to change. And based on that information, I'll be able to give you some personal advice on what I think would be the best next steps for you, whether it's working with me or someone else. No pressure. I would love to meet you and support you on your journey of healing, growth, and transformation. All right, see ya.